Hello everyone, and we are Group 11. So in this video, we'll talk about the application of integrals in two fundamental concepts in economics, consumer and producer surplus. First, let's begin with the concept of demand and supply. The demand and supply curves are visualizations of the inverse demand and supply functions, which describes the relationship of a quantity of a goods that a consumer is willing to buy and a producer is willing to sell at a certain price point. Typically, by the law of demand and supply, the demand curve slopes down and the supply curve slopes up, which means that as the price of a goods increase, the less the buyers are willing to buy and the more the producer or suppliers are willing to sell. The two curves intersect at a point called the market equilibrium point, at which the price and quantity will satisfy both consumer and producers. Consumer surplus is represented by this yellow area, which lies under the market demand curve and above the line of the market price. It shows the difference between the maximum price that consumers are willing to pay to purchase for a good and the market price that they actually have to pay for. And producer surplus is represented by this green area, which lies above the producer supply curve and below the market price. It shows the difference between the minimum price that producers are willing to sell for a good and the market equilibrium price. Consumer surplus can be calculated by subtracting the area under the demand curve to the rectangular under the price line from quantity Q0 to demanded quantity Q8x at the price point P8x. The same idea is used for producer surplus, in which we subtract the rectangular area under the price line to the area under the supply curve up to Q8x. So generally, knowing the demand and supply curves, or more ideally function, we can use integration to calculate the areas under the curves and therefore calculate the consumer and producer surplus. With the understanding that consumer and producer surplus are benefits received by consumer and producers, they are both important input in the branch of welfare economics, which study how consumer and producer interaction in the market would affect the overall well-being of the society. However, producer surplus is particularly more measurable than the other. So a manufacturer, service providers, sellers, or suppliers in general are motivated to calculate and communicate the expectation for prices at different levels of quantity, whether for internal use or for consumers. Some examples can be algorithms for taxi fares and business quotations, which can be translated to fairly accurate supply curves. On the other hand, measuring consumer surplus is a real challenge, which stems from the measurement of demand. So besides the market price, demand of a product is actually affected by many other factors, such as consumers' taste, expectation for a product in the future, or reference to other products. To make simpler calculation, according to the law of demand, the demanded quantity of a product is expressed as the function of the price of the goods demanded by customers, and other parameters are held constant. To test whether price and quantity is enough to produce proper demand and supply curves, our group collected two datasets to get the production and demanded quantity, as well as price of gas in the US from 1993 up to 2022. The data went through linear and quadratic regression, which shows typical supply curve, yet the demand curve looks nothing like the conventional one. So this can be explained from the fact that gasoline is a necessity product, whose price and demand are also prone to a multitude of factors, such as inflation, social economic movements in different countries. So this implies that measurements of demand need to take other contributing factors into account. What about some successful example? So in 2016, Uber claimed that they are benefiting US customers with an estimated consumer surplus of $7 billion USD. So the number came from two major contributing factors. First is the company's rich pool of data, and second is price searching algorithm. So the Uber price search system constantly changes according to supply and demand. So for example, prices will increase during rush hours. And importantly, the app records both successful rides and also rejection after the client knows that there is a price surge in their rides. These notions reflect the potential local demand and supply conditions and provide the opportunity to calculate the price elasticity of demand, the demand curve, and ultimately the consumer surplus. The price discontinuities from the search levels are recorded and taking many parameters to estimate outcome of interest. which contribute to the calculation of the demand elasticity, which informs how consumer would behave, knowing the price would increases. And the consumer surplus, finally estimated by summing the surplus estimated, you forecession a customer who face different level of price increases.
So that is the end of our video. Thank you all for listening.